I have two questions. One is, it was touched upon. You said that there is an 85% of science money that goes into research, goes into science, and it's wasted. It doesn't produce what it should supposed to do. So, is there a breakdown that you're aware of why that is and where these percentages of waste go? And then the second question is, how do you think that the present culture in science, the way we do things, affects all of this picture, specifically the waste of resources and man hours and funds? For example, the big problem where at the moment postdocs are very unlikely to get a permanent position. Like, we're all of us here statistically will not be here for very long. So how does that also affect the downstream effects?
Thank you. I mean, there is certainly, these are very difficult questions, to be honest. I think it's, in this article you have a certain degree of breaking down of the different costs. So it's really a very interesting article, but it would go too long to go into details here. I think personally, having been in this environment now since so many years, and I mean, clinical research is a new methodology, is a new science, in fact. When I got involved in the early 80s, there were many concepts not developed at the time. Huh? I mean, clinical research started to be done. I mean, yes, Lund did it in 1700 something, but the real modern clinical research started in the late 60s, more or less, when we had the thalidomide disaster and a lot of discussions about the better development of new medicines came into the play. I think only since then we have really this methodological approach to clinical research. And we have learned a lot, but what I'm coming to as a conclusion is that a lot of the things that we have learned and a lot of the things that we have improved over time, I find now, in my age, that mistakes are repeated, that the younger generation make the same mistakes that we made 20 years, 25 years ago, and that makes me really sad, because it shows that, yes, we personally made our experiences, but we were not able to establish that knowledge about better methodology so fundamentally that everyone who starts looking into this is now able to build on that and go the next step forward. So I think that is one of the fundamental things. We do not convey our learning well enough and broadly enough to the next generation.
Okay. Just in terms of the ethics side of this, which is what fits in so well with what you're asking in terms of wastage and so on, does it not strike you as odd as that there is, 12 people in this room to talk about what is one of the most fundamental, important issues to do with research and human beings and so on? Does it not strike you as odd it's the end of the conference and not embedded within the very heart of it, and that we should be having discussions about the way forwards and so on? When I started out in research, I started up with pancreatic transplantation. There were only 6 of us, I think, in the world doing, this is 40 years ago, only 6 groups in the world doing pancreatic transplantation at the time. And we had ethics committees then. But the ethics committee only basically decided whether it was worthwhile going ahead with this or not. It didn't dwell upon the issues that we've been talking about here now. So, for instance, I had huge problems in trying to convince the ethics committee about pancreatic transplantation because of such a thing as insulin. And they said, well, actually, what's the point in doing pancreatic transplantation when we've got insulin? Because insulin can treat patients perfectly well. So there's absolutely no point in going into research to look at the cure for diabetes. And that, unfortunately, is what was prevalent in ethics types, what they called ethics those days, kind of discussion. So ethics is a relatively new phenomenon, actually, in many parts of the world, but particularly in Europe, and had many, many different interpretations of what it was actually there to actually do. And I think we're still struggling with that to some extent, even today. But I think the fact that we're sitting in a relatively small room as part of a big conference, to me, says everything, that we still haven't got there where we're putting the priorities where we need to put them.
Can I respond to that? I'm Donna Bruce. I'm Donna Bruce, and I've been trying to present ethics at CLINAM since I think the second or third CLINAM. And I have once been in the plenary, but usually in a small session, because most of the people here are actually primarily here for the research in their field. And, but I am part of a program called Nanoathero, and I've actually left its presentation to come here because I'm an ethicist working with the program. And Christoph is also one of the PIs in this program. And it's been very interesting to be an ethicist working alongside the progression of the science, primarily looking at animal issues, because those are the main questions in this particular project. And it was very creative for the project to have done this. And years ago, Klaus-Michael Veltring, who is sitting in the front there, was chairing a working party on another project called Nano to Life, which specifically had an ELSA working party back in 2004. So there is a history of some projects working with people working ethics all the way through. But it's very difficult. When I was first in Nano to Life, I was given a plenary session. The entire program came. And I don't think I've ever had quite such a big audience as an ethicist. We thought, okay, next major General Assembly, let's have another session. Less people came than this. So it really is variable as to how much you get that sort of involvement from scientists. You can make one presentation. To keep them involved needs an ongoing conversation of a different sort of model from this sort of thing. So just a couple of reflections on my own experience on that.
Yep. Thank you very much, Donald. I wanted to get to your session here and I was not able to, which I really regret, so it's great meeting you. I mean, I'm not as negative as my colleagues are about this. I'm really not. I mean, I've worked in industry myself, the horrible pharmaceutical industry, which I don't think is quite as horrible as most people think. It has lots of hassles, like the EU. I work for the Commission reviewing things. We've got students here. I think we are making progress in ethics of science. It is getting better. I see it in the proposals that I review, cutting-edge science. Long way to go. There's much more awareness. And to get back to your point about, I mean, the fact that ethics here is a fringe. We discussed this earlier. And I said, well, it is actually a technological conference. I mean, it's not on the agenda. It is a side issue here. Sorry, it is. And I would say, if we are here, it's an important side issue, but you've got other conferences, nano conferences, where ethics is more in the center. But this kind of thing, right? On the other hand, I have to criticize myself as an ethicist, that if I am not able to be relevant enough into an area of ethics reflection, which deserves to be in the plenary. I always start off with myself rather than criticizing other people. And I think as ethicist as well, I have to look in my own soul and say, well, what could we discuss that's worth having in a plenary? I mean, so I tend to be a typical ethicist, a bit more balanced about this, and I'm not as negative as my colleagues are about the progress we're making.
Sorry, I would like to respond. I'm not negative. The thing is, ethical partners to have in this, as Donald mentioned, is essential to have them. It is essential, but we have to be a natural partner. You know, it's not somebody who is raising only questions. Mm. You have to be a partner. You can raise questions, but we as a team in the consortium have to give answers. Mm-hmm. And it's not enough for ethicists just to ask only questions. Is this or that? You know, we have to find together solutions. Absolutely. And this is something I'm not negative about. It is important. You have to have them. And also the European Commission, as Donald said, recognized this, and so ethical partner to have ethicists in a project is natural. It's without them, it's not functioning anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not only natural, but I think what we really have to achieve is that we become a productive partner. Not only a partner, but a productive partner, where people understand that when they think about the development of a new treatment, they should not only think about the technical possibilities and the opportunities that technology is providing and science is providing, but that a treatment ultimately means it has to fit also to the patient's needs, to the user's needs. So not everything that is possible is also useful to develop. And I think ethics and ethical considerations can help very much to distinguish more easily between the things that can be done, should be done, and especially if patients are involved in these ethical considerations, I think we can provide a certain type of guidance in making the development of new treatments more efficient. And once we have achieved that, we have also a concrete raison d'être to be in these discussions and to be an equal partner in the development considerations.
Actually, I thought all the presentations were actually very positive. It's really, I thought the decision from the UK with regard to the European Union was extremely negative, but I don't think they were particularly negative. I can't see what's negative about saying that ethics should be at the very heart of research and research consideration topics. And I say that advisedly because let's just take, for instance, one of the statements that we heard earlier on. That where does the patient voice come into when we design clinical trials? Now, it tends to come in quite late. And a lot of assumptions are made that there's no point in having a patient voice here because actually they don't know enough about science to be able to understand these kind of things. And repeatedly we have found that has been false as a mantra for actually designing trials, that the patient voice actually has been hugely valuable at a very early stage, much earlier than what we used to have. If you take it to its logical and absurd conclusion is you do not consult with patients until you've made all your decisions. Now, absurd as that sounds to you, that's what we used to do. We used to go right through the research programs and right through treatment protocols and so on, and then tell the patient, this is what we are going to do. Nowadays, we ask patients and we say, here are the choices of what we can do, and these are the things you can expect from them. Working as a team with the rest of the group, not in the middle, but as part of the team yourself, which road would you like to go down, and we can discuss them and you can come to your conclusions. And what we have found is, if you do that with patients, then concordance just goes straight up. If patients are part of the whole decision-making process to do with their treatment, then concordance goes straight up. If you do a diktat and you just say, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to stick at it until we've got to the very end of the program, concordance goes straight down.
Can I just, sorry, I think I was probably my mistake. I was misunderstood. I was referring only to where the negativity was, where your response to this question was, we're repeating the mistakes. That's all I meant. It was just looking at your question. Sorry, I thought it was clear. You asked this question, and I said, well, actually, I do think we are making progress. We have, no, that's the only point.
Okay, but not as big as we could.
Yeah, but I do think, I do think. But the second point, you were talking about the science, which I think we deserve to address as well, as you've come to see us. Lovely. You were talking also about the problems in the academic system.
And the jobs afterwards.
And
the job opportunities.
The job opportunity.
Generated.
And that, I share your frustration. You want to try earning a living as an ethicist, babe. Oi. And I don't have a solution, and I'm sorry. But keep on discussing and fighting, and get a students' union involved. I agree. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I know we've got another question here, but this is a really important point. And as an ethicist, my intense work with the European Commission and research ethics is that I see the problem, and for me, it's up to the academia and the universities to redevelop their guts and develop their essential position doing basic research and beware of going too much into the applied. But that's another political issue, not perhaps a subject here, might be a plenary discussion for Nano next year. But thank you very much for your interest, and I wish we could solve the problems today.
Journal called JUNK, Journal of Unpublished Negative Consequences.
Yeah. Okay, now it's really up to you. Yeah?
Well, I think ethicists have maybe the same problem as people talking about translation, because it's not interesting for academia to translate something into a real product. But what I liked very much was the presentation from Dr. Banks is most academics and talking about translation don't see the holistic picture.
Yeah.
They don't see what kind of economic consequences things have. And this is difficult to see. So I think if ethicists get more out of the corner of being philosophers, not being understandable because they have different thinking, but being more important for economic success, then people might listen to you, because I read their strategic research agenda. One of the 4 pillars they are worried about is amendment to medicines. So most people don't take their medicines,
Yes,
50%,
compliance.
because they are kind of don't worry, or they don't understand.
Yeah.
And this is the patient view I think you're thinking about, to have a medication or to have a treatment which people really understand, and then they really follow the rules to take the medicines.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I think we have to make clear to at least scientists who think about translation, so that they are aware of this, like what we are trying to always say. If you think about translation, it has to be possibly produced by industry, so you have to see if this nanoparticle can be produced by industry, or if it fits to the clinical routine.
Yeah.
Because we have seen examples where you have produced a wonderful diagnostic thing like MagForce, for example, but they had a problem, it was not really fitting the clinical routine.
Yeah, yeah.
So the patient view, the clinical view has to take much more in consideration early on, as you said. So and if we make clear that this is not just a philosopher's view, but a really practical and even economic view that ethicists have, then
I'm obviously having a bad communication day. With my tree model, that's precisely, obviously I didn't explain it well, I'm sorry. That's precisely what I was saying. Because on my tree model, at the end of the process, was marketing. And I think we have to be, I agree with you 100%. And we have to realize the responsibilities. So I agree with you, absolutely.
Can I ask a bit about the translational? Because I'm so delighted you raised it. I think there's still confusion of what translational medicine actually is. But the Dean of Education for Medicine in Belfast, Queen's University, where I work, is translational medicine. It's fantastic. It's a revolution. It's everything that we should be thinking about when we come into the medical field, whether who's the pharmacist, whether we go into it as pharmacists or so on, as a multidisciplinary team, which is what we are. Translational medicine should be core to this, about what we got to do with these medicines. What are they for? And I'll give you a really good example of how that fits in terms of the economic model and the high thinking, rather than just the philosophy of the whole thing, which has got to be there. But in terms of convincing people about making it happen, there's a big argument at the moment about health migration, about people moving from a poorer part of the European Union to a richer part of the European Union to get treatment, which are the newer treatments, the more exciting treatments, the ones that have been hyped up, so they move. Now, we know from the WHO that health drives an economy, that when you, and not vice versa, the health of a nation actually will drive that economy. If people migrate out of their country to somebody else's country to use their services to be able to be well, it will drain the drive on the economy in their own country. Now, we've got to find a balance here of the free movement of people, which I passionately believe in. Why dogs can walk across a boundary, a political boundary, as in Northern Ireland, whereas human beings can't unless they've got a certain passport, I find unacceptable. But free movement of people, along with how do you invest in the countries themselves so that in that country they will have access to these medicines for which they're trying to migrate out. And that will drive the economy of their country as well. If we really want to address inequalities in Europe, we've got to address them in the countries and in the places and the towns and the small environments of which those inequalities are happening, not migrate them to somewhere else where they're happening. But there's the balance, and that's an ethical consideration. It's an ethical consideration, and yet it's got huge economic consequences about thinking about it. And that's where I think we should be more teaching our up-and-coming politicians and medical students and pharmacy students and so on. Think big as well as the individual.
Are there other questions? Yes, please.
I have one practical question, right? So I think we got here overview what are the issues where ethics, patient organization can step in the clinical trials. So, but now how practically to do that? So let's say we have a new drug, new device, which is potentially bringing benefits for the patients, right? So how to proceed?
Yeah. Okay. You have the absolute fundamental question here, because that is where this is one of the biggest barriers that we are facing. I'm sorry that you have not been here yesterday afternoon in the ECPM conference or course, which is happening here also in Basel, because there I had a full hour to answer that question. But I will try to give it in a nutshell. The problem that we are having is that there is a really growing awareness of the need to have patients involved really early. The problem is that you do not find the patients that you would need to can discuss with you on eye level, who have a good enough understanding of the situation. And a lot of these discussions do not happen because the scientists, the researchers, industry, academia doesn't want to waste the time on explaining patients the basics and still not getting what it requires to have really a consultation, because that is ultimately what we want from the patients. No? They need to consult us on what are really the needs and benefits and what would be the best approach. And the reason for that is that there is a big capacity gap of patients who have that knowledge. There are patients, there are patient organizations who have developed that type of expertise amongst their members, or at least a group of their members. And we have a range of very good examples and where this has really worked. For example, originally from the AIDS environment, the AIDS community has developed that type of knowledge many years ago already, and they consult the companies, the pharma companies, on the important research questions that they should work on and give ideas to trial designs that industry and regulators would not dare to do by themselves. But when the patients come and say, and this is what we need, and this is the only way and the most efficient way, for example, to compare two unknown treatments in a trial, you know? Because this is what reality is happening in reality, then patients have that power to bring that through if they have that knowledge. So one key issue is that we need to increase the cohort of patients who have that knowledge, and for that we have an IMI project called UPATI, the European Patients Academy in Therapeutic Innovation, where patients are educated in a diploma course for patients in patient language about the medicine's development process and the type of issues that they should detect, that they should identify as gaps, as weaknesses, and where they should discuss. In addition, in this project, there is at the moment, you can find this on the website, there's a platform, what we call Toolbox, and this is material in lay language, in 7 languages translated, about all aspects of the medicine's development process, which is very easy for people to quickly get an understanding on a particular issue. So we hope that in this way we increase that cohort of patients who are able. What we are lacking is a platform, a matchmaking platform, where we can easily find those patients. And we had hoped that there would be an IMI project awarded to a team last year, and this was not awarded last summer, which was the big frustration, because that would have enabled us to develop that in the next 5 years. So what we can do at the moment is only to identify the patient organization, and we have over 44,000 patient organizations in Europe. So to identify patient organizations that are working in that area and ask them whether they have members who have, let's say, this development knowledge and who would be able and willing to join you. And if you cannot find those patient organizations, you can go to the European Patients Forum, EPF, which is the roof organization of patient organizations in Europe, and they can help you to identify the patient organization with which you could work. What you still have then to do is define the conditions under which they are allowed to work with you: disclosure of interest, unbiased interactions, etc. So there are a number of these things. So you need a contract with them, which makes the conditions very clear. But in this way, you can really bring in knowledgeable patients very, very early in your development considerations. And then ultimately, and this is then the economic aspect, then you hopefully will only develop a new treatment that is ultimately really creating the benefit that the patients need and that helps your economic condition.
I think also the UPATI system is fantastic. There's no doubt about it, and desperately needs more funding. But I think the will of the researchers and the will of industry and the will of politicians, for that matter, has to be there to involve them. Because when you ask the industry, do they think it's a good idea? They say, oh, yes, great idea to educate patient groups, patient advocates, so they can do these kind of jobs. And a lot of them say, and actually we're already doing it. People like Bayer and so on, they're already doing these things. But then at the same time you say, well, where do you introduce all this expertise? And they say, oh, fairly low down. And it's the will of and the recognition of the value, which is what has to be there as well. Not just the pool of people who can do the job, but along with the pool of well-educated, well-trained people who can take part in these things, it's got to be the will to actually do these things as well. And I think actually what will happen is as the evidence builds up of just how valuable this is, the more we'll see this train actually taking place. But at the moment it is by no means universal, I have to tell you that. No means universal.
Okay, I see here blinking, blinking, blinking. It's the end. We are 5 minutes eating into your coffee break or into your break. Apologies. I'm really sorry. But big thank you to the speakers and your very, very important contributions. Thank you very much for your very interesting and important questions. I hope you can take something with you home now. You have a somewhat bigger picture of what we are talking about at the moment when we talk about the ethical implications of nanomedicine's development. It is one type of treatment, but with special implications. We did not have so much time to really speak about the specifics of nanomedicine, but I think before we have not agreed and understood the basics, it's very difficult to speak about the specifics on top of that in 1 hour and 20 minutes. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.